You know I've raved about Outer before, and I love my Outer sofa, outdoor dining table, and chairs. I've had them for over a year, and let me tell you, they've been through everything, from rainstorms to scorching sun, and still look brand new.
That's because Outer makes outdoor furniture that's actually designed for the outdoors. From using incredibly durable and sustainable materials to developing innovative solutions like the Outer Shell cover, which protects my sofa and dining table against dust, debris, and dirt. No more soggy cushions or dusty tabletops. My Outer setup is always clean, dry, and ready to be enjoyed anytime I want.
Head to liveouter.com/thefounderhour to see Outer's range of outdoor furniture, fire pits, and accessories. The Founder Hour listeners get an exclusive 10% off for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply.
So elevate your outdoor space with Outer. That's liveouter.com/thefounderhour.
Hey everyone, before we get into the episode, just a quick reminder, if you enjoy what you hear, please follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. That way you get notified when new episodes drop. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at The Founder Hour. Let's get into it.
Steve Kaufer, appreciate you joining us here on the show.
Absolutely. My pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming by. So you grew up not too far from here. I think I read in Hollywood. So what was that like? What was life like for you, in growing up in, I guess, LA?
So the born in Hollywood tends to be one of my favorite trivia questions because I'm really the least Hollywood-ish person you're likely to come across. But technically, was born in Hollywood, lived there for a couple of months, and then Encino, part of the San Fernando Valley, then moved out the West Side, Pacific Palisades, and Malibu. And then at college time went east. So love LA, enjoy being back as often as I can. Mm-hmm. I feel fortunate to have grown up here.
What kind of kid was, young Steve? What were you into?
Let's see, I was a pretty outdoors kid. That was in the day when, hey, you come home from school, you get your homework done, and you go out and play, and you come back when it got dark. And for the elementary and high school years, that was pretty much the way it was. Even though we lived close to the beach at the time, and I knew how to body surf and enjoyed it, I was never part of the surfing crowd because that meant getting up at freaking 5 o'clock in the morning, and that was just not my style. I was the late sleeper, but I enjoyed skateboarding and just hanging out with friends. I was good in school, pretty careful, self motivated to get my homework done, so parents wouldn't yell at me.
Yeah,
that worked.
What did your parents do? What was their background?
My father was a trial attorney, litigator in downtown Los Angeles firm, and my mom had been a school teacher before she kind of gave that up to raise us kids.
Did you ever have any interest in going the teaching or the legal route?
No. I mean, teaching later became I enjoy sharing wisdom to the degree that I have any. I enjoy the mentoring aspect that comes with being CEO of a company. But the notion of going in and teaching the same syllabus every semester, no, couldn't do that. And
just
the notion,
a checklist of items, and I got to just cross them off my list, and regurgitate content.
Yeah, not my style. Being a lawyer, no. My father actually had suggested that maybe I didn't have the personality or the tenacity to be a lawyer. We would enjoy our debates around the dinner table, but I was a bit more scientifically or math-minded, engineering-minded, you could say.
Just naturally, you were that way.
Yeah, I like building stuff. I like solving problems. I like, at the time, I liked math equations. I entered college as a expected to be physics major, whereupon I met some other physics majors and said, there's no way I can handle this. Switched over to be a math major, which I was, good at, but it's what was I going to do with a math major? And then I fell into computer science and absolutely loved it. So kind of graduated with a CS degree.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned going to school on the East Coast, which usually means you went to Harvard or MIT or whatever. So tell us a little bit about, clearly you were a good student. I think I saw you went to Harvard. Clearly you were a great student. And, I think, so at the time, what was like computer science? What did it mean? What were some options for you, like that you thought you would do after college studying computer science?
Yeah, when I started college, it was truly a hobby. I had taken a little dabble in a computer science, not even elective. It was a club in high school, and it was like crazy old stuff. In college, I had a summer I had a summer job doing some QA for a computer company that was based out here, and I had an Apple II that I learned how to do some assembly language programming in, because I had the book and I had time and it seemed like it would be fun. It wasn't until my senior year at Harvard in 1984 that they even created a computer science major. But I had already taken a bunch of the computer science classes, and like it's magic when you can find something that you really enjoy doing and that also has great job prospects. And even then, computer programming, yeah, that's a perfectly good field to go into. And so I expected to graduate with a computer science degree and go work for somebody in the software space. But yeah, that's not what happened. I certainly used my computer science skills, but not that way.
Yeah.
And Steve, at the time, I mean, Pat and I grew up in a different time where you're expected to almost have this like path and to kind of have things figured out by college and say, oh, I'm going to go to this job and I'm going to be in this field. And then that's kind of how I'm going to rise. What was the landscape of, education to early career like at that time? I mean, were people kind of the same way as they are now? Or was it just like, we'll take anything that pays us and we'll figure things out as we go along?
I'd say most of my peers were in the, hey, I want to go into medicine, so what's my pre-med path at school? Check mark.
Yep.
Most everyone else, which was clearly the majority of the other students, were like, hey, I want to have a fun time in college. Right. I want to learn some stuff. I'm sure I'll find a job after. Right. And by senior year, people were thinking, holy shit, I'm about to be kicked out of this lovely environment and have to go earn a living. What can I go do? Right. But, I would say the number of people I remember outside of medicine that had a career plan in mind was very few.
Right.
And I was certainly in that camp. I'm like, I didn't know what I was going to do. I wasn't too concerned about being able to find something, and kind of like stumbled into the first entrepreneurial idea that we had.
And was that while you were still in school, or was that after you had graduated?
It was actually still in school. We came up, a couple of friends and I came up with this idea to write, technically, an interpreter for the C programming language, which was just something that other programmers would understand and no one else in the world would. We went about writing that as part of our, call it a senior thesis. It wasn't really a thesis, but more of an independent project, which was a lot of fun. We didn't finish it, but then hey, we saw that maybe we could do a business out of this. And we went ahead and started a company right out of school, which led me down that entrepreneurial route where so many of my other friends were getting nicely paying jobs at computer companies. And here I was, doing some odd job programming for $15 an hour and happy to have something that paid the rent, while myself and my friends were busy trying to build this new software company. And, from an investor perspective, I give a lot of credit to the investor that finally put in a few dollars because, 3 kids with a nice degree and no idea how to run a company. And, mentorship wasn't something we were great at the time in terms of having a great set of advisors, but we still managed to create something, a product that worked, and we grew it. We grew it to 15, 20 million in revenue.
I imagine the landscape of entrepreneurship or being an entrepreneur was very different in the mid 80s when you were graduating college as opposed to what it is now, where, it's become this thing to be an entrepreneur. I mean, was the word entrepreneur even something that was talked about at the time, or was it just, I'm starting a business?
Yeah,
I'm a business owner.
You're right. There was no course in entrepreneurism. There weren't the networks that exist now. You were off to start a business, and we were off to start a software business. Right. And that wasn't perceived as, oh, wow, how cool is that? Right. It was like, oh, with the little thought bubble, is that because you couldn't get another job? Or are you really, what is that going to do? Right. And there's certainly a lot more cachet around it.
Were there other software companies that were, I imagine there were, but like, what were some of the other software companies that had started or were starting at the time that you guys said, oh, they were able to do it, like, we should be able to figure this out?
Yeah, in our space, there was, around our time, maybe a little bit later, there's Object Design, there was Interleaf, there was, Lotus 123 was just down the street that was really small to begin with, and oh my goodness, was the poster child for being able to take this notion of a spreadsheet, which was previously invented, VisiCalc, and now turn it into an amazing business. So plenty of examples of kind of software gone right, and we thought we had something. We did have something that was fun, exciting to a set of folks, and we made a decent business out of it for 10, 15 years.
Well, so what ultimately happened with this is CenterLine Software. Right. What ultimately happens where you decide to do something else after that?
I stuck around CenterLine Software until its very last days. That was a fascinating learning experience that you read about in business school, but of course I never went to business school. So we had a great product for a particular computer language on a particular set of hardware. This was the C language and then C++ on Unix workstations. The market shifted over to a paradigm called client-server computing, and we saw it happening, but there's plenty of other business, and so we didn't follow that shift. Then the market shifted over to a language called Java. Mm-hmm. We didn't follow that shift, and so we found ourselves in a declining market with a product and a company and a cost structure built up to support growth, not status quo. And the company went through a lot of painful changes. And I was running engineering for almost all of that. And so I got to watch a lot of the mistakes that we had made in the previous years show up.
Yeah.
I got to see a lot of people that I thought were amazing inside the company to realize that while they were all, very nice people, they were also very lucky people to be in the roles that they were in at that point in time, and maybe didn't deserve as much credit as we were giving them because, hey, when the going got tough, then, hey, where are the ideas and who are the people that, that find another opportunity quickly?
And this is around the time, is this the 90s when the internet's really starting to take off, the .com boom, that era?
Yes, it's basically the 90s through the late 80s and up through 93, 94. Company was on fire. It was growing. It was one of the premier places to work. You were great if you could get a job there. It wasn't quite today's levels of perks and benefits, but it was a fun, good place to work.
Steve, one thing I've always wondered is for folks that start companies out of college and they don't really have a lot of work experience, or like you said, a lot of mentorship or advisors or what be it, how do you ensure that you yourself are learning and growing and staying ahead of the curve? Because when you work somewhere, right, you see how other people do things. You see what you like, what you don't like. When you're starting your own business, it's like, okay, well, shit, I'm on my own, right? Whatever. You might have co-founders, partners, or whatever, but I've got to be the one that sets the tone, and then people are going to be looking at me, right? So in those 15 years that you started your business right out of college, what were you doing, or were you doing anything to learn and grow and be a better business leader or be a better engineer or whatever you were trying to be better at?
Yeah, let me tell you the things I should have been doing because I wasn't doing most of them. And my strongest advice to the first-time founder that hasn't worked in a company before, preferably a small company before, is like, go surround yourself, get 3 or 4 people, pay them as advisors with equity, or just make some friends who have been in your shoes before so that you can call them up with the, what'll, 20 years later seem like easy questions, but they weren't easy at the time. And like when you've never had to have a tough conversation with somebody that works for you, the ways to screw it up are way more obvious than the ways to have it have an effective outcome. Whether the effective outcome is the person turns around and becomes great or leaves like lots of different ways for it to work out. But I learned a lot of those lessons by doing it wrong because I didn't have a handful of people. And then, when the company hits, 30 or 40 or 50 people, like get someone in HR that's done it before, that is used to a startup environment, not a big company HR person, who has seen it go awry with very well-meaning founder. I certainly would call myself a very well-meaning founder. To my knowledge, no one's called me names, but I certainly screwed a bunch of things up. So having co-founders that you can share the responsibility with, having a set of advisors, which you have to go network to find, and that can be awkward or difficult for the purebred engineer who's more of an introvert. I'd put myself in that camp. But hey, if you're focused on making a successful business, yeah, you definitely should do that. You can get lucky otherwise, but
did you enjoy being in that position? The leader, or one of the leaders of a company, like, was that something that at the time you enjoyed doing?
I enjoyed almost all except the people management piece. So it's not that I enjoyed the hiring, but I was probably pretty good at it because, like, I want somebody that's smarter than I am in at least the area
and
that I'm looking for. And I was mostly hiring engineers, so I did know what to look for. I was really excited about the product. I had a very natural passion about what I was building that would come across. It was a fun thing to work on. We weren't manufacturing, picture frames, something like, who the heck cares? Hey, this you're selling. So I had the pitch about what we were doing. Like the product really was helping people. The users liked it. They gave us awards for it. So it was, in that sense, an easy pitch.
So ultimately, I think I read that you ended up selling like half the company, or what happened with CenterLine?
So CenterLine had their kind of original products, which were these interpreters, and then later had some additional products for testing. And as the market for the original products went down, there was more interest in the testing product. And so the company, after doing several layoffs, it's going out of business. Do you find a home for some of it? And so the best home was actually to take the testing products, sell them to a company called CompuWare, which had a local branch. And a couple of people went along with the sale. And then the other half of the company was these old interpreter products, which pretty much no one except myself and maybe 1 or 2 other people knew how to even maintain. Yet you had a lot of major corporations still using the software and still wanting support for the software, be able to call up and ask someone and get updates. And so I started a small company to continue to do that for a couple of years while I was doing other stuff. And that was like a great little part-time gig, and it gave a soft landing to all the companies that had actually used and wanted to continue to use the old software.
Right. So when you ended up spinning out this sort of part of the company that really sounds like at the time your core advantage, and like, that was like what was working, and the rest was maybe not as working as much. Sort of after that selling of assets, did you feel like you were in a place financially where, you could kind of maybe pursue more of like things you're interested in and not really worry about money? Or was money ever like a motivator for you at the time?
I had, for the first several years of CenterLine Software, it was all sweat equity. And so I had owned a chunk of the company with my co-founders, put, all told, probably 17, 18 years into that. And that was all worth nothing, all of that sweat equity. The sale price to CompuWare didn't even begin to pay back the investors. The interpreters and stuff that I continue to maintain, hey, that brought in some income. That was good. I had a family at that point, right, but nowhere near close to college tuitions or retirements or anything like that. So I was at the point, I'm like, okay, need to go do something else. And I could afford to take a normal salary, but not no salary. So this was likely the next venture, because I had absolutely had the entrepreneurial bug at that point. The next venture was likely to be a angel or venture funded company to swing the bat one more time, using all the lessons, a lot of negative lessons I had learned at CenterLine, and kind of like try it again, knowing that it could bomb and that would be okay, and maybe I'd take a third crack, but I need to make that decision. But I knew I wanted to go at bat at least one more time.
So presumably you're in your early to mid 30s maybe at this point. You had run this company for 15 or so years. Did even having that bug, was it? And you mentioned having a family. Were you ever in a state of like worry and fear of like, I have kids, I need to support my family. I'm in my mid 30s, maybe my peers after college who went and got, cushy jobs have saved up all this money. And here I am sort of pursuing entrepreneurship. Was that ever a thing, or did you just have so much confidence and conviction that you would just figure it out?
I was lucky enough that I had a computer science degree and CS was still a hot field. So I could always fall back on working for any number of great Boston companies as a software engineer. And I did feel confident that my startup experience with all the stuff that I had built, I could get one of those jobs. And my lifestyle certainly never got ahead of my income. So I wasn't worried about food on the table. We did have the condition for kind of the next startup, which was Tripadvisor, that, hey, I needed some income coming in. It didn't need to match what else was out there, but it couldn't be zero like the first company.
As much as there's a minimum viable product, I think there's also a minimum viable lifestyle for entrepreneurs that you have to be able to, you have a certain lifestyle, you live in a certain place, you have bills to pay, you have to be able to maintain that to be able to keep going on too as well, right?
Yes, I would point out that so many companies in the 80s, when I started CenterLine, I'm like, yeah, you couldn't get money to build the prototype. There wasn't that type of, certainly not for people that had never done it before. Right. So we all the founders worked our day jobs, consulting or half-time or at a medical lab or something, to bring in enough money to pay our portion of the rent and a little bit of food, and our entertainment budget, if you call it, was done. We didn't we were happily working as much as we needed to spend as much time building that first product launch. Not so much a prototype for CenterLine, but the actual first product that we could then sell for enough money so that we could actually kind of get that loop going.
Oftentimes when someone has been through their first sort of foray into entrepreneurship and had, maybe success or not much success with their first startup, obviously you've gained a lot of lessons. And oftentimes you could even be jaded by a lot of them, right? When you're coming into the second entrepreneurial venture, you're coming with a lot more knowledge and experience than you were as a young kid coming out of college, right? So a lot of times you might, overthink things or convince yourself not to pursue things because that naivete isn't there as much anymore. How was it for you? Obviously we'll talk about TripAdvisor and what came next, but like mentally, where were you and what were you seeking to do as your second venture at the time?
I was fishing around for kind of what the next idea could be. Because as I said before, like I knew I wanted to start something else. And I felt I was just so much wiser. And I actually didn't want to stay in the software tools space because I just spent 18, 19 years there. So like, hey, let me try something new. This was, 1998, 99, .com bust hadn't quite come, but the boom was certainly there. So I kind of felt there was no shortage of ideas, lots of wonderful success stories. I wasn't personally ever motivated to like, oh, I want to go start a company that would be the next $1 billion X or go public. Mm-hmm. I just loved building stuff, whether it was like in my my wood shop at home or in class, or my big Lego castles in my room, mm-hmm. or as I got to play with my hands in software, in coding something. And so kind of with that as a goal, knowing enough people, I felt I could assemble the right, fast twitch team to be able to produce something. And I actually felt pretty confident that, hey, with the right idea, I now had the set of skills and experience that like most of, or all of the last set of mistakes I've made, I won't make again. I'll at least be making new ones, and like my odds of success will have gone up a lot. And like the story of TripAdvisor says, yes, I don't think I made any of the same mistakes, but hey, we tried something new, and for the first year and a half, it didn't work at all. It was a complete failure case, and yeah, it worked out okay. Obviously, we pivoted.
Yeah. So going back, you spun off CenterLine Software into, I believe, CenterLine Development Systems, which is like this kind of spin out company that you were focusing on. And then I think, were planning a trip to Mexico. Is that right? How does the idea for TripAdvisor even come to you?
Yeah. So it's a bit of a funny story. I'll try to tell the short version. My wife and I wanted to go on vacation. We're thinking Mexico. We went to a travel agent, which was literally the travel agent sitting in a local shop at a mall for all intents and purposes. And she said, "Where do you want to go?" And we said, "We're thinking about Mexico." She goes, "Where in Mexico?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Where do you recommend?" We're on the East Coast. Cancun's a natural opportunity. Like, where else? Well, there's Playa del Carmen. I'm like, never heard of it. Okay, here it is. Pointed on the map. Where do you want to stay? I don't know. Where's your budget? Well, we don't have a lot of money. And she showed us 3 beautiful brochures, gorgeous brochures. I remember this, 30 years, practically 30 years later. Inexpensive, moderate priced, expensive. And I'm like, great. They all, honestly, they look the same to me. So I'm going with the cheap one. And my wife said, well, let's talk about it when we get home and maybe do a little research. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea.
That means you're not going with the cheap one.
She was very financially savvy. So, but she was a little more, ahead of her time in this case, because she's like, hey, let's go look on the internet, see what we could find. I'm like, yeah, all right. So I used all my search engine searching capabilities and found that there was nothing on the internet about any of these hotels. And so I was really persistent, kept at it, finally found what at the end of the day was somebody's ancient blog post. It was before blogs existed, about their trip to this inexpensive property where they had also posted photos where some of those photos were clearly not up to my standards, let alone my wife's standards. And so I'm like, wow, that was super useful. We mentally upgraded ourselves. We booked the mid-property, had a great time, came back, and on the way back, she's was saying like, hey, you're looking for a new company idea. You should start a company that would help people find out what's good and bad about all these properties and everything else to do in the location. And I said, yeah, I don't think so.
Why didn't you think it wasn't a good idea?
Like, oh my God, that's so hard to do. How are you going to find all this information? And
too many inputs and
like
outputs.
Inputs and like I had spent 3 days searching, and it was such a pain in the butt to find this. And after we had it, how are we going to make money at it? Because like, hey, we'd offer this advice, and yeah, I don't know. Maybe I was just in a pessimistic mood at the time, but.
Right.
The flight was bumpy.
Too much turbulence.
The story goes, it was like a year later, that was still the best idea that we had come up with. So I'm like, hey, let's go give that a shot. And we originally thought we could actually crawl the web to get the information. Turned out that was at the time too difficult for us to do.
Meaning getting all the properties and all those things listed on the website?
Getting all listed and finding all of those blog posts and individual user reviews that were actually already
it's like a very manual process.
Interesting. Yeah. You wanted to just go and source the existing reviews. And
I wanted a search engine for travel.
Yeah.
Because when I typed in the blank, blank, blank hotel in Playa del Carmen, I got back a boatload of travel sites that could book me a reservation at that hotel, completely uninteresting to me. I didn't want to book it. I wanted to know
more about it,
whether the pictures were accurate, whether people liked it or not.
Right.
And the internet was just beginning to have that level of info on it. But it was tucked away literally in the GeoCities homepage of someone that had posted a little travel blog about it. Like, you couldn't find it. And the search engines most definitely were trying to not surface that information because that's not authoritative. That's not branded. So I'm like, hey, I'm going to go take the opposite approach of, Google was up and coming at the time. Google said, trusted, branded, what everyone links to. And I'm like, yeah, no, I want to find the page that practically no one's ever read, but it's a firsthand account of this hotel or this restaurant or this activity.
Customers are rushing to your store. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/founderhour. Once again, go to shopify.com/founderhour to take your retail business to the next level today.
You mentioned it was the best idea you had at the time after a year or so of pondering. What were do you remember some of the other ideas you had?
I don't.
Okay.
Can't help you there. Lost in the dustbin of history.
You know what's also crazy is that like 98 seems like not long ago because like Pat and I are both 90s kids. And then you look back, you're like, shit, it's 26 years ago. And it's so crazy how like different, finding and booking travel was. And it's obviously quite the opposite now. It's almost too easy and you just get to spend a lot of money even if you don't want to. But I mean, was there no other way other than a travel agent to book travel? I mean, what were the other ways you could book travel?
You could, Expedia had come out already.
Around,
Travelocity was there. So you could book a hotel, some hotels, and you could book your airfare by yourself.
Yep.
And those sites were exploding. People loved to be able to do that sort of stuff all by themselves. They sometimes had info on the hotel. Sometimes it was just they being the Expedias of the world, a couple of pictures and a price and availability.
Mm-hmm.
Which was, again, a heck of a lot easier than calling up the travel agent and saying, hey, I want this, I want that.
Right.
It's funny, one of the original ideas, business parts at TripAdvisor was, now that we had all this great information, let's go sell a version of it to travel agents because they're going to want to make better better recommendations. And they hadn't been to almost every hotel they were recommending because they're not world travelers themselves. Zero interest.
Really?
Absolutely not. Travel agents don't want to pay for anything. And if you're in the travel industry, you know that there's, travel agents have to get paid somewhere. They get paid by commissions from hotels. Commissions vary. So they just have a very, there are great travel agents out there, but in general, they're swayed by the commissions that they're getting paid.
But your business model wasn't to kill travel agents. It was just to make searching for what you wanted when you were traveling in the hotels and whatnot easier.
We were trying to be friendly with everyone, certainly with travel agents. And we loved the notion of being able to book a trip by yourself.
Sure.
But the one thing an ordinary user was missing was the advice on, hey, which of these 10 hotels in LA should I stay at?
Right.
Which restaurants should I eat at? What are the best activities if I'm going to Cancun? Like lots of very basic questions that a travel agent would know better.
Yeah.
And so as the internet became popular, people would be searching for all this online. They'd find whatever content was there. And we just thought, man, if you could democratize all of this, if you could eventually get thousands and then millions and then tens of millions of people to be writing about their experiences, you'd have the wisdom of the crowds. And in that sense, we were very much competing against the Lonely Planet or Let's Go guidebook or Frommer's or Fedora's or the guidebooks that most of the audience here probably doesn't even recognize the names of.
Yeah,
but
none of those sounded familiar to me.
That's how you traveled back then when you went to a destination you weren't familiar with.
Yeah.
There wasn't the internet. You picked up a guidebook and you saw their recommendations and you picked from them. Well, the guidebook represented one person's stay at one point in time, usually several years ago, in this one destination. Obviously, a great guidebook writer cannot stay at more than a handful of hotels in any city at different price points. And it was out of date, and it was a one-day experience. Whereas, hey, TripAdvisor has 3,000 reviews of this hotel. You're getting the good, the bad, and the everything in between. And as a user, you get to read the details. It's not just a 1 to 5 score. And TripAdvisor always still has a minimum word count. So you don't get any reviews that said, loved it. You or hated it. You get the why.
You got to give some more juice. Yeah. One of the things that I'm thinking about while you're talking about this and just my brain connected to another idea, but and this is more of a philosophical conversation perhaps that we could take a slight deviation on if you don't mind. But I think about TripAdvisor and all these other travel things or any other technology that makes let's use travel easier, right, today. And let's think about the 80s, 90s, a time where you're using guidebooks, you're going to a travel agent, and it feels as though, and again, just to play devil's advocate here, there's more of an adventure component to that, right? Like you don't know what you're going to experience. It might be the worst time of your life. It might be the shittiest hotel. It might be the greatest hotel. You might meet the most unbelievable people there. You might have the most amazing food in that city that you don't know about. And now today, it feels as though everything, because it's faster, more accessible, more apparent, it's kind of taken away from the like adventure component or like the anticipation, right? You already know before you go there, like, I'm going to go to this restaurant. I'm going to go there. I'm going to go there. You can't just get lost, right? Did you think about that at the time, or is that something that you've thought about now?
I've heard that frequently over the years when I was running TripAdvisor. I'm like, oh, don't you feel like kind of bad you're taking away the spontaneity of travel? And I'm like, I'm calling bullshit on that. Like, you want to plan none of your trip, go have a great time. You want to plan half your trip with TripAdvisor and leave 2 days completely empty? Go for it. Right. Explore. Right. This is a tool you can use as little or as much as you want. It's free. If you want to be spontaneous, I adore that. I always try to leave time on my calendar whenever I'm going anywhere to just walk around. I love walking around a new city.
Discover something you'd never thought about.
I don't plan the route. I just go and I try with my sense of direction to remember how to get home. And that's it. So I mean, there were a lot of challenges to running TripAdvisor. You had people that would want to like boost up the ranking of their hotel or restaurant because they knew they would get more business.
Right.
Absolutely true. If you're higher on the list, you're going to get more business. And TripAdvisor, they commissioned a study at one point, like impacted 10% of all travel. People were looking at TripAdvisor, figuring out where they
That's
want
a
to
big
go.
number.
Like, that's a really, really big number.
Yeah.
And that really big number invites, fraudulent actors that want to manipulate the number. So we had a pretty big team dedicated to kind of like fighting the people that would try to write a fake review. And I was always very empathetic to the hotel owner that went like, hey, like this isn't fair. This person never stayed here. Because there's always two sides to it. There's the like never stayed there or just didn't want to voice their complaint when they were there. And so we did have a lot of thoughtful conversations about how we're overall clearly helping the industry, but we knew we always needed to be at the top of our game for that.
Well, I like the way you phrased it too, that TripAdvisor was like a tool, right? Whether or not you use it and how you use it and how much of it you want to use, that's on you. And I think, and my question was, specifically to travel, but I think that applies more generally to technology, period. Like, you hear all these like, oh my God, AI is going to kill every job. It's like, right, there's that doomsday version of it where you could, if you believe that, then it's probably going to kill your job. Or you could start adapting the tools of technology and better your job and better your work. And perhaps there's other ideas that you build on top of that. But it was just a thought that came to my head in terms of travel specifically, because I could imagine that's something that people were bitching about at the time. It's like, oh, well, I want to leave that room for just doing whatever I want to do. Like, I don't want to know if it's a good hotel.
Yeah, I'd say that was clearly the very small minority opinion, and or those folks didn't use TripAdvisor, so they never had a reason to complain to me. Either way.
Yeah.
But the site was massive and at a global reach. It was talking to over 1 billion people a year. And
wild.
Like, that's a lot of people who had a slightly better trip for having used the tool. That's great. A slight increase in overall happiness times 1 billion people a year. That's nice impact.
It's pretty
I like
good.
that.
Yeah.
How did you eventually figure out the revenue model? Because you talk about some of the challenges early on.
Yeah, so we started with a B2B revenue model. We were it's called license search results to other travel players, because the .bomb had already happened. You'd already seen a bunch of companies crater that had spent insane amounts to attract eyeballs to their sites. And so we were going to be a bit behind the scenes. That didn't work out for us because there really wasn't anyone interested enough in paying for our travel recommendations and insights, though we tried. We flipped the switch and went direct B2C, and through PR and through search engines, we gathered a following that said, hey, someone searching on best hotels in Boston would be able to find our site. Or is the Boston Copley Plaza Hotel good? Oh, they would find our site. And we would do a great job of answering that question, better than any travel agent, better than Expedia or any other website. And it turns out that if you give people a lot of information that helps them make a decision, they're grateful. They're not actually grateful to TripAdvisor, but they're grateful to the other travelers that took the time to post the review, such that when we ask them, hey, will you come write a review for TripAdvisor? People weren't very interested. Are they willing to write a review for TripAdvisor? No. Are you willing to write a review to help your fellow travelers? Yes.
Right.
And so when the messaging switched to pay it forward, all of a sudden the reviews started flowing in. And this was great because it was like anytime you contribute anywhere, you feel like you belong more. And so we invented badges, and we never paid people to write review, but we could reward them with kind of fame and some stature on the site. And you had people that had written thousands of reviews or posted in our forum tens of thousands of times, purely because they want to help other travelers with something they know. And that's pretty compelling. And like the whole business grew. And one of my favorite lines about TripAdvisor as a business model was that, like, how many other businesses can you think of where every employee goes home, goes to sleep, wakes up the next morning, and the product is actually better? Because overnight, 1 million more reviews got published.
Right. That
Like,
user-generated.
And the algorithm got updated.
But you talk about optimizing the experience from moving from B2B to B2C, but what about the actual revenue? Like how you're making money? So it sounds like the experience on the B2C side was great, right? Like people loved it, people needed it, you figured out a way to get them engaged and to continue to contribute. How did you figure out how to sustainably keep the company going from a monetary perspective?
Yeah, great. So there was a point where, hey, we were 6 months from going out of business. We had a B2C site. It had some traction. Users seemed to like it. And we had no money coming in the door whatsoever.
Did that worry you at all?
Yeah, we were about to go out of business. I went to the board and said, hey, we have, a couple of $100,000 left in the bank. All the stuff we've tried hasn't worked. We got about 6 months of runway left. You want me to close up shop early, give you back 10 cents on the dollar, and we're done. We did not see a path to success.
And this is a year and a half in.
This is, we had struck one deal with Lycos as a co-brand who brought traffic and brought zero revenue to us.
And had you raised money from investors?
We had raised $3.5 million.
Okay, so you went to them and said, basically,
they were on our board. I'm like, hey, you want 10 cents back? Because I can't in good conscience say, like, there's a story here, because there wasn't. And I didn't realize at the time, but makes sense now, for an investor to get 10 cents on the dollar back or zero,
it's the same.
It's the same for them.
Let's roll the dice.
So they're like,
it's more trouble actually.
Well,
it's just like they're fuck it. We just
less
threw
of
it
a
away
write,
already.
it's less of a write-off.
Let's just say they made the right call. They said, keep going. If it comes to it, do an orderly wind down, please. Don't.
But Steve, I'm curious. I want to zero in on that kind of situation. Why had you, like, I don't want to use the word give up, but why had you essentially just kind of like throwing your hands up in the air and we're like, I don't know what to do at this point?
I think I had said, like, I don't have a plan that I believe in. There's lots of shit I can try.
Right. Yeah.
But, it's very reasonable for you to say, hey, take the money out now, because it's probably not going to work.
Right.
I've always been, with all the boards I've interacted with, a realist.
Yeah,
about
pragmatic.
this.
Yeah.
They understand it's a risk. I made it clear, like, I'm happy to keep going. Like, absolutely. I'll be the last person on the ship here. But, like, prudently, I didn't have a story I believed in.
I don't want to come to you guys when shit's already hit the fan.
Well,
I'm coming to you when the shit's flying towards the fan.
Yeah, it's already, pieces have already hit, believe me. And they said, to their credit, hey, keep it going, give it your best shot. We understand these things, And so we quickly, as a team, said, all right, let's try some banner advertising, because travel audience, people click on banner ads and travel banner ad. Like, great. I remember, like, I'm not going to take the time to actually go sell a client on the banner ad. I copied an Expedia banner ad. I put it on the site, and I breathlessly waited to see a wonderful click-through rate, because it was a travel ad on a travel site. This would be perfect. And we did industry average of 0.1%. It was total failure. We tried it was called LookSmart at the time, a business listing directory. Like, hey, let's call up hotels, let them sign up for $100. They could have a phone number and a URL on their listing for their lifetime.
Yeah, this is like the early days of like affiliate marketing.
We were trying everything we could think of. That didn't work either, because, like, why don't I pay you? Who are you? Why do I want to pay you $100? How much traffic do you have? Oh, forget about it. Of the people we even reached, the thing we didn't stumble upon, but was third or fifth on the list, was this cost per click, where we had 50,000 or so hotels in our system in the U.S. And when you looked at the Boston Copley Plaza Hotel. You had some user-generated content to see whether it was any good. And we put a link right at the top that said, check rates and availability for this hotel. Because obviously, if you like the hotel, you needed to know, is it available and how much? And that was a link that went directly into the Boston Park Plaza Hotel on Expedia, where you could put in your dates and find price. And that had a great click-through rate because it wasn't really advertising. It was what people wanted to do. And Expedia was willing to pay for that click.
Interesting.
So that model, which you think of as Google AdWords today, it was just more programmatically generated. We stole from GoTo.com, predecessor to Google. So it wasn't a particularly original idea, but applied to travel, applied the way we did it quickly enough. And we turned the corner and turned that into a $10,000 revenue month, again, up from zero the month before, to a break even of 70,000, which was kind of our break even point.
And did you have agreements where if there was a booking or sale that you would get some sort of commission, or was it purely just pay-per-click, cost per click?
The clients chose to pay us on a cost per click basis, but they were doing exactly what you point out. They were saying they sent us 100 leads, 5 of them converted to bookings. We made, $100 in profit on those bookings. For the 1,000 leads, we made 100 in profit. So we'll pay TripAdvisor 50 cents a click and we'll keep the other 50 cents. That was
not bad.
kind of the math. I'm like, okay. And literally our first order was for 50 cents a click. And that was cheap from their perspective and a fantastic source of revenue for us. And then we got some more travel clients on board and we started doing this for flights as well as hotels. And we very quickly turned the corner because we'd already had enough of the website traffic and now we had a monetization model.
And kind of going back to your first business and how over time as the internet was developed and computers started to people started to iterate on the computer, programming languages changed and that affected your business model. In this case, did you feel like this was a sustainable, there's early traction, but did you feel like it was a sustainable revenue model? And if not, did you introduce others along the way that outside of this too?
It was definitely instantly sustainable for the next 10 years and kind of that time frame. Because if a client wanted to pay us on a commission, totally good with that. If they want to pay us on, the game changed immediately when the client said, hey, if the quality of these leads stay as high as they are, we'll pay you, no cap on our budget. Awesome. This is in the performance category, not the brand category. There's lots of sites like Expedia out there. We can sign them all up. And now it was just a question of, all right, we have 100,000 users. How do we get to 1 million? How do we get to 10 million? And so it became how do you grow traffic and how do you do so affordably? Well, so far we were spending zero on customer acquisition costs because it was search engine and word of mouth and PR and CRM. That's great. We eventually added a lot of paid marketing to it, but most of the company's branding over its lifetime has been organic in one way or another.
And how much of your time were you spending on the engineering component of it?
I had a great CTO co-founder in the beginning, replaced by, or when he retired, somebody else, again, great. So I spent very little time on the engineering. I spent a good chunk of time on the product and a lot of time on the overall marketing.
Yeah. And were you still at a point where you didn't like the people management, or at this point, did you enjoy the people management?
I don't know that I'd ever say I enjoy the people management part, but I know it is the number one most important thing to achieving the outcome, the company's success I'm looking for. So I feel I've gotten, I'm not great, but I feel I've gotten, more than good enough to do it. And then as a leader for the companies up on stage presenting the vision, I was the worst public speaker on record known to mankind before I started CenterLine. Got okay at it at CenterLine. Was, I've done quarterly meetings at TripAdvisor forever, and then earnings calls, and and all the rest, and then spoken to very large crowds. And like, if you want to become good at something and you study hard enough and you pay attention, you watch your own videos, like you can become better. And I think of myself as a proof point that it can be done, because I was terrible at it.
For sure.
So, obviously, it grows. At some point, you sold the business to Barry Diller's IAC. How did that whole deal come about? Why did you feel like it was the right time to sell the company?
With hindsight, one would say, no, he should have hung in there for several years longer. But at the time when a company comes along and offers $200 million cash for a company that's been in existence for 4 years, where it's life-changing money for certainly all the founders, every employee had options at that point.
And is this during the global financial crisis or around that time?
Right?
2004. So
2004.
Yeah,
okay, a little bit before.
The time was fine. But I'm like, absolutely life-changing. and I fully, and so I would give the benefit of hindsight. No, would have been worth a lot more. But at the time, I don't beat myself up, because it was the right move given the risk profile of us founders. I thought I would probably last 6 months to a year inside of a bigger company. I wanted like my baby to find a good home and then be transferred over to what they might call professional management or whatever. But Interactive Corporation, which was the name of the company that bought us, and then later when we spun out to be part of Expedia, like they did a phenomenally good job. In my biased opinion, but financially for them as well, leaving us alone, letting us tap into any of the assets that they had, and said, hey, you guys are doing great. We don't want to screw it up. Go, go, go. And with that level of oversight, hey, we certainly made a few mistakes, but it worked out really well. And the original vision of like build the biggest, the most popular travel site in the world, we were able to achieve that, which is a very different vision than the most profitable travel site or being the best at hotels or whatever. But through being part of Expedia and IAC, we got the financial safety. It was good to be part of a bigger organization well steeped in travel, because I got to learn a bunch of stuff that I never would have. Worked with and worked for some great people there, while we still had our own little TripAdvisor and then not so little TripAdvisor. Then fast forward, Expedia came to the decision in 2011 to spin us out as our own public company, because we were a very fast-growing media business, joined into a transaction business. And the thought was, hey, there's more value for shareholders as separate entity. They spun us out. There was more value was created. And, Expedia didn't own any of us, any part of us. So we got to run as a standalone public company. And it didn't turn out to be so bad either.
Yeah. So I guess once it spins out as a public company, you still continue to run it, right? For a long time, I think 10 years or so almost.
From 2011 through 2022 when I stepped down.
2022. And so I guess by that time, it sounds like you had a great IPO. I'm sure the company continued to grow and enter sort of new different kind of avenues along the way. What I guess ultimately led to you wanting to sort of leave this baby behind and perhaps venture out into other things?
Yeah, great question. So I'd say my age and my desire to follow through on the dream, hallucination, whatever you want to call it, of trying it one more time.
Okay.
I love TripAdvisor. It's such a great company. It's in a awesome time right now with generative AI coming out. The company, many years ago, we diversified away from hotels into experiences in restaurants. That's paying off dividends now. Like, companies in a really good position. But I'm 62 now. When I turned 60, I was like, hey, I'm interested. I'm almost 62. I was interested in, do I have one more startup in me? Because I always kind of thought I did. But after 20 some odd years at TripAdvisor and never even being tempted to do something else, I'm like, okay, it's pretty clear to me. I'm going to have to quit this amazing gig in order to go do that next thing.
Was that the extent of your thought, that I have another startup in me, but I don't know what it is yet?
No idea what.
Okay,
Literally.
but you missed the feeling of starting something from nothing and that early perhaps impact on the world that you felt like you're making like a dent in the world in something completely new.
Truthfully, I felt like TripAdvisor could have such a bigger dent in the world if I stayed there. It's a massive footprint, massive site. But 22 years doing kind of the same thing, or at least 18 years after we figured out the pivot. And it's exciting. I love it. I know lots of people in travel. It's a great industry to work in. But like, hey, I'm getting a little, not tired of it, but looking to think about a fresh intellectual challenge. What's that going to be? I don't know. I haven't had any ideas in 20 years. Better take some time off to go figure it out. And that was the game plan. In a transition like this, as a public company CEO, I was never going to give, hey, 4 weeks notice and I'm out. So I told the board, told the shareholders, and 9 months later, successor in place. I was part of the search. Great guy. Okay, now I'm free. And believe it or not, I really hadn't spent any time thinking about what comes next, even in those wind down months.
I was going to ask though, like outside of work, because work is this like confined thing, right? And you ideally want to, I don't know, maybe create some boundary around it so you can kind of, like you said, intellectual kind of, exercises or just things to keep your mind, sharp and interested. Like what other things were you interested in? Like, were you like a big reader, or what kind of topics or things that did you kind of try to tap into and, I guess, jog your mind about that perhaps maybe led to what comes next?
Yeah,
nothing.
Not much.
Nothing.
It's everyone has different personality. Of course, for me, I'm like, when I'm focused on something, I stay focused on that something. And so for 20 years in the shower in the morning, the ideas I'd be having were all about solving a particular work problem, or where it could go, or how to deal with, or like it was, I won't say all consuming because that has a negative connotation. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I left my work at home and I unless I was on the road, which wasn't that much, I was home and present for dinner. Like it was just, I didn't take the work calls in the middle of dinner. I didn't deliver any work calls in the middle of dinner. It was like there was a family time
Separation
that was
church and state.
Very important to me. In earlier years, I'd absolutely go back to work on my laptop from home after I put the kids to sleep, but that wasn't interfering with the family life. And I kept up friendships and played tennis, but there wasn't another strong intellectual, if I was reading a book, it would probably be a book about leadership. It would be something
related to. So you almost felt like you had to have just like a hard cut, not knowing what comes next, and just give yourself some time to think about what the next thing is.
Yeah. And so look, circumstances completely different. This hard cut, I'm like, great, I don't need to work anymore.
Yeah.
I'm old enough that I can justify retiring if I want to. Furthest thing from my mind, I couldn't imagine not doing something full time with a huge passion around it. So what was that idea going to be? And I literally told myself, all right, be sure you don't fall for the first good idea that comes around. Put 10 ideas on your whiteboard, come up with things that you think you'd be interested in. What problem is this good? Like, I've done enough angel investing to know the questions to ask myself in terms of what's the market size, who's going to pay for this, how
the founder,
what's the competitive advantage, what's going to happen in 3 years, 5 years, what are your risks, to understand it all. And I came up with a bunch of ideas. I wanted to stay out of travel.
So this time you went to an insurance agent.
So that market had already been picked through very cleanly. I was already on the board of Car Gurus, which had done something very similar in automotive space. and love marketplaces because, wow, when you get one, there's a huge barrier to entry. So marketplaces were on the list of possibilities. And, I think augmented reality is going to be really massive in the future, but a little uncertain as to how many years in the future. And I want to sink my teeth into something now. So lots of ideas had pros and cons. Love, personalized medicine. I quickly found out I have absolutely no skill set that's remotely applicable to doing anything relating to medicine unless it's maybe consumer delivery, which was not something I was interested in doing. So I'm got to rule out a bunch of stuff.
Process of elimination.
I learned more than I ever want to know about NFTs. Nope, no thank you. But I didn't.
That's such a foreign concept now.
Feels like
it's
ages
weird.
ago.
But when I stepped down, that was one of the
hottest things.
Yeah. So I'm no, I don't get it. I might be missing it here, but you got to go with what your concept.
I forgot what even it stands for.
Non-fungible token.
Right. And then that's where I discovered Give Freely, because it was one of the 10 ideas on the whiteboard. And, I kept them all up there until I was able to cross them off. And there's some, but that was the one I kept waking up in the morning thinking more about.
How did that, what was the inception of that though? What prompted the concept?
I learned about browser extensions, a decade ago when they were first there. And pretty impressive the fact that just backing up, there's a ton of online commerce that's only going to grow, period, full stop. These browser extensions are super popular. They've been around long enough for us to know that they're not going to go away tomorrow. Google could turn off the switch, but they're not going to. So they're here to stay. And you look at how powerful they are. You've got the password managers, you've got ad blockers, you've got Honey or Capital One Shopping in my category, Rakuten. There's literally 100 more. And you have, create a PDF out of this web page. You have there's 100,000 different Chrome extensions out there. And so I'm it's fascinating what they can do. And then I've separately, I've been blessed to be able to be philanthropic with some of the stuff that's gone well for me financially. And so, other folks will turn their attention to philanthropy, but I'm there's way too many great causes out there. I have some money, but not in infinite supply. So I'm well, is there a business I could invest in or build that could create an ongoing revenue stream for all these charities? Hey, well, browser extensions, and I knew a lot about affiliate marketing from TripAdvisor. So that basic concept of, wow, if you could tap into 2% or 5% of online commerce and have that money go to charities that the user likes, then that's kind of the stores, and that's how Give Freely works,
right?
Basically.
And it's quite a passive thing, right? Like you mentioned, to actively be a philanthropist, not only do you have to have money, but you have to go out there and see what causes there are, maybe get to know, there's a whole process to that maybe the average person might not be in a place to go through, right? So you're sort of creating a more of a passive way to give back.
Yeah. So think about the TripAdvisor. We've democratized travel with these billion reviews and opinions gathered over time to help people form the right decision. Now, if you took, let's just say, out of all the people in the world, let's just say 100 million people, which is a lot, but compared to the world population, not that many, and say, imagine every one of those folks has a browser extension called Give Freely that saves you money as a user when you shop by applying coupons without you having to think about it or do any extra work. And as you're buying the stuff that you would buy anyways, I don't personally want you to buy stuff you're not interested in. There's too much consumerism already. But everyone does buy stuff online. So if you're buying something you're ordinarily going to buy, and 5% of whatever you're buying is going to the charity of your choice, you might save money with coupons, which goes straight to your pocket. That's a win for you. You're buying something at a partner store that's generating, call it a 5%. The store's paying me a 5% commission. I'm turning around and giving that 5% directly to your charity. Charity's clearly happy because they did nothing and they got an extra $5, $10, whatever 5% on whatever you're buying is, times 100 million people. And now, by a conservative estimate, you're probably generating $1 billion a year in charitable donations, not coming out of the user's pocket. Stores happy about this because they sold stuff.
Right.
So it's just a cost of goods to them, and they'll pay it all day long without any cap on it. So I got a win for the shopper, save money on coupons, win for the store because they got another sale, win for the charity because they got money from nowhere. And I turn this small personal investment that I'm making in building Give Freely into something that's generating the $1 billion a year. You guys know about Giving Tuesday?
Yep.
Yeah.
Like, oh my goodness, what they've been able to do on the back of a great cause and publicity going from nothing. I didn't realize that they're like less than 15 years old and they've built this movement that's
They built like a
generating
day.
they like billions of dollars a year.
Yeah.
Like, that's impact.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, that's a big, call it a big marketing
Right.
campaign, exquisitely well done. I look at Give Freely and say, well, I'm just kind of taking the marketplace approach or the other approach. I'm like, let me get into something that 100 million people are doing almost every day, shopping, or every week, or however often they do it. And what's wrong with this picture? And so that's where the company is right now, where we have a product. It's in the Chrome store. Go to givefreely.com. It's free to download. We're adding more and more coupons all the time because that's a core value proposition from you. For you, the user. Every time you buy something at these 10,000 different stores, you get the confetti rolls, and great. It's that 5% donation made to the cause you selected.
How do you make money as the company?
In what I've described so far, we don't.
Okay.
And I'm the sole shareholder. We're never going to sell the company. We're ideally in 20 years, we'll give it to a foundation that'll continue to run it ad infinitum. A different question could be like, well, how do you plan to pay your bills for the next 20 years? Because you've got staff and marketing expenses and everything. And once I have enough users, once Give Freely has a big enough user base, we'll be able to tack on a small advertising model, which I know very well from TripAdvisor days, non-intrusive to a user. But like, if you have 100 million people using your software and you move some of them from one spot to another, like, I loved Amazon Smile as a program.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Amazon Smile disappeared. Amazon got greedy. I don't know the inside reason, but bummer. But I'm perfectly happy to put a little link up on an Amazon product page that says, buy this on Walmart. And some people will click on it. And I mean, Amazon can join my program. That would be great. I won't put the link there. Or
they can acquire Give Freely.
That won't happen. But perhaps one day they might resurrect the Amazon Smile program. Yeah. It was a great one. But with that link to, hey, check out the price over at Walmart. If a user clicks on that link, I'm pretty sure Walmart will pay for that traffic if they convert. So there's a bunch of ways that I can pay the bills. The only question is, or the big question is,
how long?
How do I get to the 100 million number?
Well, yeah, and I was going to ask, based on the data you've seen so far, do you think that as a society we'll be in a place where giving back becomes just a part of, like, we've gotten used to paying transaction fees to credit card companies, right? That's just the way it is. Do you think we'll get to a place where giving back is just a part of the pie of like consumerism and just making purchases?
Well, I'd say you as a consumer, you're not used to commission fees for credit cards because you don't see them.
Right.
You're paying the price that's listed on the lamp or
the
whatever
merchant
you're
is
buying.
the one that is
The merchant's
yeah.
paying it because they need to take the credit card, and credit card companies have a great life. Oh my goodness, the amount of money they print. So if you're asking, hey, do I think we'll ever reach the point where consumers will willingly add $1 to everything they're buying online? No, I really don't. Some will at some points, great, but most people, no. Will consumers smile when I tell them, hey, the store just contributed $1 to your favorite charity? The price was the same. Like, yes. And so kind of it's extremely passive on the part of the user. They don't have to remember anything. And so the primary mission is, how do I generate $1 billion a year to charity? The secondary mission is like, and the user selected the cause that they care the most about. Imagine it's a climate change cause. Now they have in their kind of eyesight in the Google search result page, I put that icon there with every search they do. So they see the cause that has some meaning to them. And my secondary goal is to get them more engaged in that cause. So I give the charities a little ability to message those users. And so maybe it's a message, hey, we're having a rally in your area. We'd love for you to join us. And this is to someone that they don't even know, their name, let alone, ability. But for the charities to be able to pull in more people, to become more connected, that's how that individual might start writing a $100 check a year to the charity because they're more connected, and maybe Give Freely help them become more connected from just the constant visibility and the charity being able to give them the right messages at the right time.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, I feel like this is a very interesting one that I would really like to dive more into, but I feel like maybe down the line, I'm sure it's going to grow and we can have a part 2. But I know we gotta wrap up. We appreciate you coming by, just being so candid about your story and just sharing everything from your personal life and everything there all the way to creating these incredible companies. And we can't wait to see what happens with Give Freely, from now to the future.
Well, thank you very much. I would share it is a treat to be able to share the things that worked and some of the things that didn't work in my past experience. And yes, I can only hope that Give Freely has the same type of impact that TripAdvisor's had. And that's where my passions are directed now.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Steve.